Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study. This is Exodus 17. I didn't spend as much time on this one as I might have thought I would have. Seemed like I'm spending 3 weeks to 3 weeks on my chapters lately. Let's go. My name's Kurt. I'm your host of Freeway Bible Study, a ride through a skeptic's ride through the Bible. Hold on, let me maneuver here. It's a wet road. You gotta watch out these painted parts, the slippy parts. I decided to go ahead and turn it on because I'm gonna take the pass, which is a fun ride to go, and it should be pretty this early in the morning. Nice, we can see a nice sunrise as we ride. A little bit of a break from our usual ride just along the freeways. So here we go. Again, like I said, I'm a skeptic. I don't believe, atheist if you like, I don't believe the claims in the Bible, but yet I'm very interested in studying and knowing more about the stories within. And I really want to, 2 or 3 things I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand and see if there's any reason to believe the historicity of what's said in the Bible. You know, does it match with what we know from historical records? 2, I want to understand the moral framework of God, because even in both the Old and New Testament, even if you're a Christian and if you're one of those that disregards the laws in the Old Testament, still these laws reveal something about who God is and what his characteristics are like, what his morals are, his values are like. So it's worthwhile to know. And 3, I basically want to speak on from an informed perspective when I have conversations with believers and unbelievers as well. Speaking of which, interesting thing happening in the last 2 weeks. I've been getting twice, once last week and once this week, comments from other non-believers. Oh, I got a green light. Lucky me. Regarding, let me go ahead and go around this truck. Comments regarding very good. Sorry, I kind of flumpled into the microphone. It's just so kind of funny. This is comments from atheists, basically saying, Kurt, we're worried, or I'm worried, because they came to me individually, and one was my daughter. Are you becoming a Christian? They're concerned after my everlasting damnation, lest I believe. What a curious thing. So it's been an interesting 2 weeks. So I guess it's been about 2 weeks since I've been studying this chapter, and I'm ready to wrap it up. So let's get started. Exodus 17. At this point in the chapter, Moses and the people are leaving the wilderness of sin. And I learned that the sin in this case is not sin as in, the bad things you should do. Oh, look, there's snow on the mountains up there. Can you see that? Beautiful. This is reference to a Babylonian god, a female goddess named Sin. Can't quite remember what she was the goddess of. So this is her wilderness. So this is not necessarily an uninhabited wilderness, as we'll see in just a moment when the Israelites run across their cousins, the Amalekites. It's not a wilderness, so to speak, but it is a place where people have not only been, but they've named the place. They've left it. Well, they're leaving the wilderness of sin, but they're entering a new territory. So scratch what I just said. You get the idea, though. None of these areas are necessarily uninhabited. We learned earlier that in the wilderness of sin itself, there were the Bedouin people who had been there for thousands of years before. So this is kind of like when I was a kid and they taught us about Christopher Columbus. They said Columbus came to an unpeopled land, and that's the impression that I had as a schoolboy. Was Columbus arriving at the shore and forests and meadows and the lake, and yeah, maybe there might be an Indian or 2 here or there, but they don't count. I'm sorry if that sounds insensitive, but that's the way I was. That's the impression that I came into young adolescence with from my upbringing, that America was an empty land. Yeah, sure, there were some people, but that should be disregarded. It was an empty place, and that's the impression that I had of the wilderness where Moses and the people would wander for 40 years before I started rereading the Old Testament, especially rereading it deeply, so that the way I do it now, every time I encounter a place name or the name of peoples, I do a Google search and I look for it. And I try to place it on a map and read what I can about those people and those places. And that's revealing to me that, hey, this is not a wilderness without people. It's a wilderness with lots chock full of people, some of whom must be destroyed to make way for the 2 to 3 million people of God. Let's continue. So in this chapter, we've left the wilderness of sin. And the people are getting thirsty. There's manna from heaven and every morning, and there's quails every evening, so they got lots to eat. But it looks like they may be thinking God forgot about giving them something to drink, not only for themselves but for their animals as well. So they start, as usual, grumbling and moaning and complaining, so much so that Moses thinks he's in danger of getting stoned. So he has a chat with God and says, you know, what about these people? They're more, I mean, we actually got a quote from the people themselves. You know, it's like, it sounds a lot like that original quote. You know, wouldn't it have been better to have left us in Egypt, so that you know, were there not graves enough in Egypt, and we had the flesh pots and the plenty of food in Egypt, and now it's the same thing. Wouldn't it have been better in Egypt? What, are we supposed to die of thirst, and our animals, our families, and our animals too out here in the wilderness? So Moses tells this to God, and God tells him, well, okay, well, here's what you're going to do. There's a big old rock, and I want you to go to that rock with your staff, which I'm tempted to start calling that thing a magic wand, because he really uses it like a magic wand, right? I mean, he uses it to tap the ground and turn dust into mites, and to touch the river and turn it into blood, and he used it to become a snake, and then he held it up to part the seas of the waters. And didn't he use it also when he was invoking the manna from heaven? And we're going to see him use it in a very wand-like way in just a minute. And by the way, I always thought that staff was made of wood. It's not made of wood. Hey, when did that road come into existence? It's made of sapphire. Wow, a sapphire rod. Now, just kind of superimpose your old Charleston Heston 10 Commandments movie and see him holding up the rod of sapphire rather than the rod of wood. It kind of changes the tone and tenor and character of the whole story, doesn't it? I find that very interesting. Oh, let me see if I can make sure my helmet is properly sealed. Just a second. I noticed there was some noise in the last video. Wah! I had to take both hands off the wheel. Hold on. Okay, I think it sounds like it's making a lot of noise. Let me close this one up atop too. Good. I hope that's okay. I hope it's not too loud. And I'm trying it with, I'm switching the thing. I've got it. I'm doing a little test right now. I'm opening a vent to see how it sounds, and now I'm closing that vent. I hope this is okay. So anyway, so God says, Moses, here's what I want you to do. That big old rock I just mentioned, go on up there, and I want you to take your staff, and I want you to put it on the rock, and lo, the fountain will come. Oh, but before he does that, he says, first I want you to collect the elders and have them walk with you. Wow, look at Catalina Island out there. See that? It looks like a mountain range out there, way out there over the sea. That's actually an island, Catalina Island, and it looks like it's standing up straight to welcome the dawn. That's amazing. Looks much closer than usual too. It's like 25 miles out. So he says that. He says, I want you to touch the stone and the waters will flow. So, but I want you to gather the elders and have them walk with you. And he does that for a purpose, because he wants, according to Jewish scholarship, God wants the people, he wants the elders to witness this miracle, so that the people, now I'm going to reduce my speed down, maybe this will help with the noise. I think this is going to help a lot. He wants the people to be under the impression that, really, it says I'm going to be there? Oh, never mind. That God did perform a miracle. Otherwise, lest they do not see the miracle themselves, they could simply say, oh, there was water coming out of the rock all along. What miracle are you talking about? So Moses, that's why he goes and he collects the elders of the people to bring them with him. Look at that sunrise on the mountains. Looks like the Himalayas, don't you think? We'll have a better view of it in just a minute. Wow. I think we call those the San Gabriel Mountains. And they also kind of extend into the San Bernardino Mountains. So that's what's going to happen here. So Moses collects the elders, they walk along, they go to the rock. Moses places his staff of sapphire on the rock, and the waters begin to flow. And this is sufficient to water the people and the animals as both. But the Jewish perspective is that it was more than just touching the stone with the staff. The impression there that they say there was that Moses actually inserted the staff within the stone, thus in some way kind of splitting the stone, which is an interesting. I wonder why they add that bit on. Look at the reflection of light. I think that's Los Angeles down there. Yeah, I think that's downtown LA. We're seeing the big beaming light reflection off one of the big towers, the skyscrapers down there. Astonishing. So there's a little more to it as well. The Jewish perspective, this is according to Rashi, the famous rabbi, the Jewish perspective is that when Moses did this with the staff, when he brought forth the water, just as he did when he brought forth manna, I guess he didn't use his staff with the manna, right? Because he didn't. This was an opportunity for Moses to demonstrate to the people that the staff was not simply an instrument of punishment, as it was with the Egyptians and with all the things that were done with the parting of the waters and the closing of the waters and all the miracles that brought the 10 plagues onto Egypt, all that stuff. This was a chance for Moses to demonstrate to the people that his sapphire rod or staff was indeed an instrument for good as well. So the Jewish scholars make sure to make a point of that. Now that's why I'm saying before that this staff, this rod, is really starting to look like a magic wand, right? I mean, it's got, and now the fact that it's made of sapphire doesn't help much, and it really is, and I'm tempted to start calling it a wand, but I'm afraid that if I do so in my comments on social media, that people are going to not take me so seriously, because I am serious in this exercise, in this study, and I'm afraid that if I start referring to it as, a magical device, they're going to think I'm being disrespectful or deliberately, silly, and I don't want that, because first of all, I don't want that. I don't want to approach the Bible from that perspective. I want to approach it from an open and objective frame of mind. In fact, someone commented this morning that they were a little bit concerned that the language of my post on social media was giving the impression that I was starting to take this stuff seriously, as if I might actually become a believer. And that's good. That means that I'm not trying to fool anybody, but that's good. That means my effort to try and walk the middle ground between belief and disbelief seems to be working, at least in terms of the impression that it's giving others. Maybe a little too far the one way towards the believer. So anyway, I'm gonna, maybe just here in the videos I'll call it a wand. Moses' magic wand. And that really doesn't sound good, does it? I'm sure that, believers will cringe when I say that. Maybe, or maybe they see it that way. So anyway, now we got the water flowing from the stone, and God's not going to let this pass. He gave the people what they wanted, but He's not going to let this pass. These are a doubting people. These are an incredulous people. They are what does Moses say? A grumbling people. What are they? There's a word out there that's in the Bible that I can't. A stiff-necked people. That's it. These are His people, and He's with them. I mean, the cloud and the fire are still there. They're still in the camp. The manna is appearing every morning, and the quail every night. Why are these people doubting? Good gosh! And these are the deserved people? I'm sorry, but no wonder God's not going to let them into Canaan a little later. 40 years from now, 39 years from now. So anyway, here we go. So God's taking some notes, and just about the time that all this happens, remember they're wandering through the desert. So they wander into the territory of their cousins, the Amalekites. Amalek, it would be the name of the cousin in question. They wander right into that territory. Hey, hello! Sorry we didn't give any notice. There's 3 million of us here, and we're we're looking for a place to live, and for a while, wander at least. How about you guys? Can you bring us in? Okay, I mean, it's one thing to have your cousins show up for the weekend, but 3 million of them showing up for, wow, look at those mountains, for gosh only knows how long, and they're armed. So the Amalekites, who indeed are their cousins, these are the descendants of, hold on, let me see if I can put it right, the hairy guy. What was his name? The hairy brother. Remember? Sounds like an Ewok. It was one of Abram's sons. Was it Abraham's or Jacob's sons? Esau. These are the descendants of Esau, the Amalekites. I mean, so they're on the good side, so to speak, right? I mean, they're, wow, look at that. Woo-hoo! It's a sign. It's a sign. I don't know what. Look at that. Look at those clouds on the horizon over there. Stunning. Wow. That's Mount Baldy. We're in the top, 10,000 feet. I've been to the top. And I've been to the top of all those peaks. Early going alone period in high school. I went to the high school for a year at the foot of those mountains. That's when I didn't even realize what going alone was. That's another part of my life, this whole going alone thing. So anyway, so the people now have wandered into the lands of the Amalekites, who are the descendants of Esau. Whoa, I'm losing my battery here. Hold on just a second, I gotta fix this. You guys take a look at the view. Looks like it's on. Okay, so that's what's going on there. And so guess what? We don't know what kind of interaction happened, if there was some conflict or a clash between them, but God basically says, okay, takes Moses aside and says, okay, Moses, here's what you're going to do. I want you to get Joshua, and I want you to tell Joshua to gather some men and go out there and fight with Amalek and his descendants, the Amalekites. Fight with him. And so Moses does that. He tells Joshua, gather some men, get the best men, and get out there and fight tomorrow. And Moses adds, and just so you know, I'll be up on the hill rooting you on. Go team. So early in the morning, Moses climbs the mountain with his brother Arron, and I think the guy's name is Hur. Is that right? I'm probably getting that wrong. Anyway, this other guy is a younger man. He is Moses' nephew. He's the son of Moses' sister Miriam and her husband. So he's an insider, maybe even a prince of some sort. But Joshua is going to be the real guy that's going to take over, right? We all know that. So Moses climbs the hill with his magic wand of sapphire, and he's got Arron with him, and forgive me if I'm getting his name wrong, but Hur, whatever his name is, it's a small name, short name, 3 letters I think. And they climb up to the top of the hill, and they're standing there, and there goes Joshua with his team of men out, and they're gonna fight with the Amalekites. And the fighting begins, and it's going to last all day and into the evening. And Moses notices something interesting. Oh, by the way, Jewish commentary says that Moses actually took a seat, but he made a point to take a seat. Well, he had Arron and Hur move a big flat rock to a good position to see, and then he sat on that rock. And he made it a point to sit on the rock rather than have a nice cushiony chair made for himself, because he said, because as long as Israel is being is suffering, so he will not have comfort. Moses too will suffer by sitting on a hard rock. So he's sitting up there, and he notices something as the battle proceeds, as these battles do. This is hand-to-hand combat, by the way. Of course you know that. Look at this big giant thing. This is a huge convoy truck thingy. Look at the truck at the very lead. It's been here for 3 days. Look at those tires. Wow. So Moses knows something. Notice something. He notices that when he lifts his arms during the battle, raises his hand up in the sky, maybe holding the staff. No, not holding the staff, I guess. Oh yeah, he's got the staff, because God specifically said, take the staff with you. Yes, No, God specifically said, use the staff when you made the water come out. And he said, it's the same. Someone asked me on social media, was it the same staff used before? And yes, in Exodus it actually says the same staff you used to touch the river. So we know it's the same thing. But anyway, Moses is sitting up there. I'm sorry to be long-winded. He's noticing that when he's got his, not just one hand, but both hands up in the air, like he just don't care, sorry, that the battle goes well for Joshua and the Israelites, but when he lowers his hands, the battle goes well for the Amalekites. Now, so he tries to endeavors to hold his hands up, but he's tired. He's an old man, and after all, but he's got to be pretty strong. He's carrying around that sapphire staff all the time. It's got to build up his muscles, but it's still, he's tired. So I guess he communicates what his hypothesis to Arron and her, who then stand on either side of him and hold his arms up throughout the battle. That makes that iconic picture that you may have seen. I've seen it, you know, of Moses standing with his arms extended, and a young man and an older man, because I think Arron is Moses' older brother, standing beside him holding up his arms. That's that iconic picture. And so now, because he's got his arms held up, the battle goes well, and indeed the Israelites prevail, and Joshua wins. This is, I think, Joshua's first big win as a leader of the Israelite army, of the warriors. And this is going to presage great things for Joshua, who will indeed become Moses's. He will inherit the leadership role from Moses after the end of Exodus. There was something I wanted to say about this. Oh yeah. So some scholars wonder what's the symbolism of holding the arms up? No one really knows, of course, but one interesting speculation I read was that when the arms are up, look, can you see the big airplane flying over it too? When the arms are up over the mountain there, well, it's much closer, of course, the airplane. That when the arms are up, that is symbolic of the people lifting their eyes towards heaven, and that's why they're victorious, because they're in supplication to the Lord by lifting their eyes up. And when they lift their eyes down away from heaven, the things go bad because they're not focused on God. That sounds like something somebody just made up, right? It says, hey, I can see an interesting allegory in there. Is that the right word? You know, an interesting metaphor is maybe the better word for our faith, right? Oh, sunlight. Haven't seen that for a while. I'm leaving half an hour late to work today because it's a Friday. I get to work fewer hours on Fridays. On the Fridays at work. So now the Amalekites are defeated. Moses, excuse me, I gotta sneeze. Moses, is helped down the mountain by his companions, and Joshua brings his army, what remains of it, back to the camp. And that's the end of it, but not quite. God now speaks to Moses and says, and it's interesting to read different versions of the Bible. I read the NIV, the King James, and a Jewish version of the Torah. It's interesting to read the different languages, because in one case it says, God says, listen, I want you to remember this, Moses, and I want you to write it down. You know, in other versions it's kind of like, wow. Take some notes, and I'm not conveying it very well, but it was interesting to read the difference. I would go from one to the other and read it. It had an interesting language to it. But in the long and short of it is God saying, this day needs to be memorialized. And I want to make sure that, I love the way this goes, I want to make sure that Joshua hears this. Or that you write this down and you show it to Joshua. I think it actually says that I want to show it to Joshua. And this will be, according to the Jews, a commandment. It's not just an event, it's a commandment. Note that. And the commandment is this. God commands that the name of Amalekite, which of course means that the people of Amalek, are to be stricken from the face of the earth, utterly. Now, that's kind of a tricky thing to do when you've got that command written in the Bible. It means you'd have to kill them all and then go in with a big eraser and erase that passage from the Bible. Because otherwise their name is going to be in the Bible. So, how do you do that? I don't know. So, and of course this presages Joshua's eventual leadership role. by virtue of the fact that God is commanding Moses to make sure that Joshua is aware of this fact. That kind of stuff is the stuff that really impresses me about the Bible. The continuity between the chapters, because it won't be until the next chapter, or next book that is, that we'll actually see Joshua begin to take his leadership role. But nevertheless, the authors of Exodus make sure to add a nice little connector bit between the two books. I like that. I think that's interesting. It doesn't make me believe that it's of God, but it makes me believe it's some good writing. So how do you escape that as a believer? How do you escape the command from God himself to wipe out the Amalekites? Now, I'm assuming there are no Amalekites left, but let's say someone appeared today and says, hey, guess what? I just got back from, like results back from Ancestry DNA, or me and 23andMe, and I'm 75% Amalekite for some reason. How did that happen? Or maybe even some small amount, 3%. I don't care, whatever. All traces have to be gone. So that would mean, let's say you're an ultra-Orthodox Jew, where you're taking all that stuff seriously. That would mean that, it's time to get out Grandpa's sword. Go track that person down. And, as Joshua did, cut off their heads. Because that's how Joshua did it, according to Rashi. He lined up the Amalekites. Now, Rashi's a little more nicer. Apparently it wasn't wholesale genocide. Rashi said Joshua lined up just the mightiest of the Amalekite warriors and beheaded them one by one, as kind of setting an example. Now, that's not the impression I get elsewhere. The impression I get elsewhere, especially from God's words, is those Amalekites, there shall be no more of them. So if that's the case, if that's all Joshua did, then I'd have to say, in my my trivial understanding, that he didn't fulfill the letter of God's law. Is he really deserving of getting into the promised land? That's a good question, if I do say so myself. But so how do you get away from that? Orthodox Jews, you need to track down that Amalekite, that claimant Amalekite, and kill them and wipe them out. And who are these Amaleks? Well, like I said, they're a people, relatives of the Israelites. So there might indeed be Amalekite blood out there. If the Jews are right, that Joshua didn't kill all of them, just the mightiest of them, the mighty men, so to speak, then there should be lots of Amalekite blood out there. Wow, man, that's a can of worms for the Orthodox, at least. But I think it's a can of worms for you too, you believers. If you're just I don't know the right way to say it. You're a bread and butter Christian. You're rank and file Christian. You're, Sunday service Christian. Pastor Bob. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or mean or anything like that. I'm just trying to find a way to describe you. You know who you are. You're the Christian who's more of a what's the word? Cultural Christian, is that it? It's a part of your culture, it's part of who you are. You don't really think about this stuff very much, maybe. Just enough until you get discomforted, and then that's a good word. That's the word, one of the words God used when giving instructions to Moses about killing, or the description of the warfare between Joshua and the Amalekites. He said Joshua discomforted the Amalekites with the edge of the sword. that's putting it softly. Gee, discomforted. So anyway, but you know who you are, right? You're the people who have a Bible, and you open it once in a while, and maybe you put it in prominent display somewhere. Maybe you keep it, on a shelf at home, or maybe you keep it sitting next to you in the cab of in the car. People come in and they see it sitting there, and it's ooh, you're a believer, or something like that. Or I'm not trying to criticize you, and I'm not trying to disparage you or make fun of you in any way. If you don't fit that description, then ignore what I'm saying. But I think there are a lot of people who are like that, because they talk to me ever since I started this project. They don't seem to really know the Bible very well, and they simply recite the oft quoted phrases about faith and giving your heart to Jesus, and they'll use lots of capital letters when describing His law, His word, or God in capital letters or things like that. But that's about as deep as they seem to go. And if it's you, what do you do with that commandment? Well, I think I know what you do. You basically ignore it, because the feedback, I actually took a poll on Facebook. I took a poll about how believers interact with the old law. And I didn't get very many responses, but the Jews basically appear to be in a position where they need to follow the law. The old law counts, but they don't need to do so most of the laws because there's no temple. I don't know how that keeps you from killing Amalekites. I don't know if you need the Sanhedrin judges to affirm ancestry DNA's results in someone's 0.2% Amalekite blood. I think you need to kill them. I don't think so, but according to the Bible. So the Jews are kind of off the hook at least until the temple's built. The Muslims are off the hook because the whole thing is bunk, because it's the Quran it's all the Old and the New Testament are both so corrupted by time and translation and human interference. That's why the Quran was given to us in its perfect form, and to set the record straight as the final and last testament of God. So they're off the hook too. The ones who are on the hook are the non-Orthodox Jews who, for whatever reason, wouldn't follow the commands even if there was a temple, and also like I said before, the types of believers, the Christians that I was talking about, who view the Old Testament as an interesting history lesson, but not something you necessarily need to follow unless Jesus specifically mentions the commandments in the New Testament, which I think you're wrong. I just don't believe you. God in Matthew, Jesus quite clearly states that until heaven and earth are destroyed, we are to follow the law. He didn't say this law, that law. He said every law, not a jot or a tittle shall be changed. You are under that law, and if the command, if killing the Amalekites is the commandment, so be it. You would need to get out your ancestor's sword as well, just like the Orthodox Jew, and go hunt down the Amalekite and decapitate them if you want to at least follow Joshua's lead. So there you go. I think that's about it. That's the end of 17. Learned a lot in this one. Had some interesting experiences of my own with family members, and co-workers doubting my atheism. In fear that I was going to give up my disbelief in favor of belief. What an interesting juxtaposition of concern, right? And by the way, one more experiment I did on this. I kind of did a thought experiment. I tried to imagine, how is my situation different being in a family? I'm in a family of non-believers. I didn't necessarily teach my daughter not to believe. I just never, I never taught her to believe. And she had lots of opportunities. She went to a really nice Christian school in Japan. She was taught to pray, learned all about the Bible and stuff, and she's gone to church with her friends. So, and I've never dissuaded her from any of that. So she's had her chance. So I think she's a non-believer, an atheist on her own 2 feet of her own right. My wife has always been like that, as most Japanese are, and but. So what's that like if you got a household with we know what it's like if you have a household of believers and someone starts to doubt, and the family gets worried. Oh my gosh, little Johnny or Sally, they're not going to be one of us. They're starting to doubt. They're asking questions. Let's send them to the pastor. Whatever the case may be. And in some cases they'll be excommunicated, right? And I ask myself, is that any different from my situation where I'm studying the Bible every day, quite visibly, out in plain open sight, posting all my thoughts and observations on social media and on YouTube? And my wife and daughter see this, and others see this, and they're concerned. And I came to the conclusion that it's exactly the same. It's no different at all. It's basically all comes down to leaving the social bonds, to the concern over the continuity of the family unit, of the friendship bonds that exist, which can be compromised if one person gains or loses some sort of religious faith, right? Because that's fundamental to the whole equation of the family or the friend relationship. Furthermore, there's the curious, as I like to say, juxtaposition of concern for the emerging believer or existing believer after the immortal soul of those who do not believe or who are leaving the faith, and the concern of the non-believer or existing non-believer over the fact that the new emerging believer or current believer is wasting their life, throwing their one and only here and now away in favor of some imagined hereafter and reward to come, which is indeed the way I view Christians. I see most of them as living good, pretty good people, very good people in many cases, pretty screwed up morals for the most part, but pretty good people trying to be good people. I believe they want to be good people, but I believe that they're creating some cachet of living that they will enjoy at a later date, like chipmunks stashing away acorns in the hollow of a tree for the coming winter. Only in this case, the acorns are imaginary. The hollow, it doesn't exist, and the winter to come is death, and there will be no enjoyment of any of this empty treasure that is wished for and expected. And what's worse is that they do this at the expense of their current life, almost like waiting out the clock, right? And you see those stickers on the back of these cars sometimes that say, "Not of this world." Yeah, not of this world. It must be kind of nice sometimes, huh? To think there's something else you're going to get, so you don't have to, even if you have to deal with the problems of this world, you don't have to necessarily trouble yourself too much about them. After all, they're someone else's trouble. They're God's problem to deal with. Here we go. Okay, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. Have a great day, and make it a good life. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.